Hi everybody, if you're wondering what your house is worth, you might just be watching the right show. Welcome to What's My House Worth? My name is Rob Ticktin. I am a broker here in Needham with Encompass Residential. We provide brokerage services to longtime homeowners. I'm also a builder right here in town.
And I'm Ryan McDonnell. I am a broker and a builder with Hawthorne Real Estate. We also provide brokerage and custom building services right here in Needham as well.
All right, well, we're going to switch things up a little bit this month, a little bit new flavor to the show.
It's very exciting.
It is very exciting. Instead of just looking at a few houses that sold for the previous month, we're going to look at all of them this month. So before we do that, let's get a very treetop broad view of the sales data for the month of July, and it was coming off a really hot June. Things held up pretty well, wouldn't you say, Ryan?
They did. I mean, we did warn all of you faithful viewers last month that you're in for a letdown from the peak of June into a more of a standard, 33 sales in the month of July, which is down from 64 of last month, but still a good month for June. Also down this month is the average list price down to $763 from $850. And the average sales price down to $746 from $850, or from $819 rather.
That jumped out at me too, and another thing that I found strange about that was the fact that usually when you go down in price, you see dollars per square foot go up, but dollars per square foot also came down, which tells me you have a lot of people who were just interested in pushing through the inventory knowing that the summer months were coming up.
Yep, and that's not atypical.
That's not atypical, and if that keeps up, then you're going to see us just probably vault right into spring as long as people are willing to be cooperative with their prices. Would you say that's true?
Agreed.
Going back to the numbers also, so typically going on into this month, it was 320s, I believe, was the typical price per square foot. Isn't that right? Sales price?
From last month, yeah.
From previous months. Average days on market, 62, that's down. Yep. And when you compare July 2012 to July 2011, you see things are pretty consistent. But let's take a look at the last 4 months leading up to July and get a feel for what's going on here in Needham over the last 4 months. What do you see?
I see a gigantic spike in June, which, as everyone remembers, our June was very, 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 very big in terms of volume. But we're leveling out to the normal sort of seeing the sales for the month in the 30s, which is what we've expected over the last few months.
Right. It was 64 in June, 30 in May, 26 in April. And I think what we were most curious about was how is the market going to bounce back coming off of that big June number, and it seems to go right back to where it was before, which was not a bad place to begin with.
Right. So we didn't see that big drop-off that we were maybe concerned about.
Right. So will we see it next month? Well, we'll have to wait and see. But for now, July looking pretty good. But how does this particular July stack up with the previous Julys leading up to July 2012? And we see July, even though the summer months are considered to be the doldrums of the real estate world, it's been done a pretty good job over the course of the last few years, would you say?
I would agree, and I think that speaks to the Needham market, as we cover every month, is the Needham market does give you that stability that some other towns may not provide. But also, we did have that spike a few years past, as you remember, that homeowner tax credit did play, a small part in Needham, not as much as it did in other parts of the state, but definitely could be a factor to see some of those high volumes in that year with the tax credit.
I was surprised at 2008 and 2009. Those would have been years that I thought would have been lower than 2010, 2011, 2012, just because of the economy and what was going on during that time period. But it seemed like Needham has never really taken a hit.
Good for Needham.
Yeah, good for Needham. So there's your broad-based view. And so what we're going to do now is take a look at every single per MLS individual sale in Needham. We're going to start small, work our way up by sales price. There were some people wanted alphabetical. We're going sales price.
Yeah, we didn't go alphabetical.
So if you want alphabetical for next month, you can call us. We'll give you the number a little bit later. But with that being said, let's dive right in to Central Avenue. 842 is the number. Ryan, thoughts?
The first thing that jumped off the page at me was the original list price. It was listed at $400,000, sold for $350,000. But there was a $1,000 sales reduction that took place very shortly after the property was listed. And to me, I think that was a broker and a seller getting together on a sort of a corrective measure and repricing. It may seem like a very insignificant thing, but $1,000 to get from $400,000 to $399,000, there's something psychological about a buyer coming in the door at $399,000 versus $400,000, and I think that's why they did it.
Yeah, I wouldn't make a habit out of doing $1,000 price drops, but in this instance, it wasn't so much a price reduction as it was an adjustment to make the price what it should have been in order to spur some sales, and evidently that's what happened here. Listed at $399,000, soon thereafter sold for $350. Last month, that would have been considered the not-so-big seller. Today, it's just the first one on the docket. Next up, we're staying right on Central Avenue. We're moving to 164 Central Avenue, and this one sold for exactly what it was listed for.
Yeah, $375. I mean, it's a small lot. It's under 5,000 square feet. The house is just over 1,100 square feet, sold in a month at asking. So it's somebody who was able to objectively look at their house, price it right, and sell it. So good for them.
Small lot, but the assessed value right on point there. $372.3 was the assessed value per the town, and our friend Chip Davis, so he was spot on with that one. Next up on the list, we go to 142 Grosvenor.
We've got sale price at $460, originally listed at $525. One of the features of this property, according to the listing sheet, was it's a good opportunity to build. What do you think about that?
It was a good-sized lot for building, but it was in a good spot too, Broadmeadow School District, but backed up against train tracks right behind the lot, correct?
Right.
Is that
yep.
what you're getting at?
That's where I'm going.
And does that bother you? Do you want to live right next to a train track?
I mean, it certainly makes it a tougher sell. I mean, you might have a situation where somebody gets out of the car and they're walking up to the house and they say, "This is great," and you're in there, you're showing it, and everybody's happy, and all of a sudden you got the chugga chugga chugga.
Right.
Yeah.
But you got to, more often than not, you have to give up something. In this, they gave up the train tracks, but they got a good-sized lot, a good school district, good neighborhood, and $460 seems to be about right, wouldn't you say, for that?
I think it's a fair price, and it's the offset of the train tracks being nearby is you also have Hersey Station nearby.
That's
so
right.
It's very
Walk the
convenient for a commuter.
Sure. 308 Webster's next up. Pretty close to Needham Heights. Walk to a lot of things location. I had a chance to see this house inside and out, and a lot of space in there. A little choppy. The lot was a little funky, so not a whole lot you could do in terms of expansion. It was one of these situations where you get what you get, and you don't get upset. But $529 seemed to be the right price for this house. It sold shortly thereafter for $520, and it was on the market for just 2 days.
Yeah, good for them.
So that's a quick mover. We like those, especially as listing agents. Next up, 33 Gould. Any observations? I know you like this street, right?
I mean, Gould is sort of a cut through from one busy street to another. It's a cut through between Central and Highland, and there's a lot of commercial buildings on Gould Street. So the residential side of Gould Street, sometimes you have to take a big house and maybe price it aggressively. And I think they did a pretty good job here. A relatively small days on market. It's a big lot. And it's sold quickly at $527.5.
And that's a good number, I think, for 1,200 square feet. It was clean on the inside.
Yeah.
You could tell from the pictures. It was dated, but it was clean. On to 37 Valley. Cul-de-sac location. We like that. Good size house, 1,800 square feet. But there is one thing about this house that works against it. What is that?
It's a little noisy.
A little noisy. From what?
From its proximity to 128.
That's right.
So close to the highway. It's the kind of thing where you talk to homeowners who live in that area of town, and they will all say the same thing, that the highway becomes background noise that you really don't hear, but you have to be able to sell that to somebody who doesn't, who hasn't been there as long as you have, and then that's something you have to overcome, kind of like the train.
Right. It's soothing, you could say. Kind of like waves crashing on the beach a little bit.
Right, except the view's not as good.
The view's not as good, but you don't really have to see it because there is a nice tree line going around
True.
there. But you do have the cul-de-sac, which obviously counts for something.
Yep.
We're going to stay along that 128 kind of corridor there. We're going to move to 175 Greendale Ave, not too far away. This one sold for more than it was listed for.
Yeah, it's a big house. I mean, it's just under 2,000 square feet and selling in the mid fives. I mean, that's a lot of house for the mid fives.
The listing sheet said updated country kitchen with island. When you think of an updated country kitchen, what do you see?
I see a lot of rustic wood and like the kettles and the pots hanging from.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah. You hear anything when you're in there?
Chickens. I think of chickens.
Yeah. I like chickens.
But not so much visually, just audibly.
Really?
That's Greendale Ave. Next up on the list is 11 Mark Tree Road. This is a corner lot, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's on the corner of Great Plain Ave. So I think that this house actually did pretty well, all things considered, because that's a busy corner. Because Mark Tree is very high traffic, especially on the weekends, with people going to the RTS, which we here in Needham lovingly refer to as the dump.
Yep.
So it's a high traffic corner, but this house is kind of set back a little bit. It's a little bit shielded from the street, and it's sold for over asking. So I'd say this seller's probably pretty happy.
Nearly 2,000 square feet. That includes some finished basement space as well. 57 Emerson, this is a house that sold, we're working our way towards 600,000 now.
Yep.
Still though, surprising, we're pretty far in and we're still talking about houses in the
Yeah,
fives.
definitely.
Modern and renovated kitchen for this one as well. Seemed like a nice house on the inside.
Yeah, this one was on and off the market. It was originally listed in 2011 for $634, and then it didn't sell. It went through some reductions, and it was taken off the market. And during that period, the owners did some renovations. They updated the kitchen. They did some painting. They did some other light cosmetics, and put it back on the market for $619, and it ultimately was reduced and sold at $579. And I think if I had to guess, what hurt this house's marketability is it's a 3-bedroom, but you have to walk through one of the bedrooms to get to another.
Oh,
and,
is that right?
Yeah, and that is it works a lot of times if you have small children, maybe kids in cribs and in that nature. But when you start getting older, that becomes kind of dicey, and it's one of those things that we've touched on in previous shows. And when you have to start defending or overcoming certain things like a train, like a highway, like a bedroom that you need to walk through, it just makes it difficult to sell, and that's ultimately what happened here, I think.
All right, on to 9 Beach Street we go. A house that didn't sell quite as quickly as some of the other ones. 4 price reductions it took to get this one to finally sell at the price of $592,500.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot. That's location driven. Beach Street is off of Gould. It's one of those locations where you really have to get your price right, and there are plenty of comps of capes in this size that you can look at to point to that did better than $592,500, but when you factor in the location, that's probably about where it should be.
Right, and overpricing, you never want to overprice a house, but as long as you're aggressive with your price reductions and you're signaling to the market that you're willing to negotiate, it doesn't hurt you quite as much as it does to stick at a price that's too high, and then all of a sudden you're tied and you're married to that price, right, and you're showing a reluctance to listen to what the market is trying to tell you.
Right, I mean, ultimately you'll get there.
Ultimately.
So
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, before we get on to Reservoir, I mean, you had touched on how we seem to be going through a lot of these and still not getting to the 6s. It's a good point, and we're looking at 33 or so sales in July, and 10 of them are under 600,000, and that's about a third. And I think that speaks to Needham as a market, in that you have all ends of the spectrum. I mean, you have the $1 million plus homes. You've got a lot of new construction. You've got a gigantic sweet spot in the 6s and 7s, which just gets drilled. And then you have an affordable end of the market. So there really is a broad spectrum in this town, which I think speaks highly of the town and the market and its stability as a whole.
Right. Well, we saw those numbers looking at the broad-based numbers, that there was some action, and this was a month for a lot of the lower-priced inventory to move. And we're still in that ballpark right now with 25 Reservoir. This was a house that in another location, based on its size and the condition it's in, would have gone for a lot more than it did, but its proximity to the highway explains why this one sold for $600,000 right off the exit there off of Highland. One thing that I'm sure that they were telling prospective buyers is, I know the Department of Transportation is working on a noise-reducing wall there right along that area where 128 exits off at Highland. So a lot of the noise that exists there right now, as I'm sure these buyers are hoping, will be reduced at some point, presumably within the next year.
Yeah, well, good for them.
So anybody looking at that area, you want to go to the Department of Transportation website to get an idea on how far that's going to extend.
That's very helpful.
Thank you.
You never know what you're going to get here.
Thank you. I know. Some people do their homework every once in a while. We move on to 30 Aletha Road. You know a little bit about this lot, don't you?
I do. Part of what we do at Hawthorne Real Estate is we redevelop land and properties in Needham. And this was a house that we had looked at, had conversations with the buyer about the valuation. The seller rather. The seller was adamant about wanting a certain number, and the number we didn't feel was necessarily reflective of the market. But what can happen if you're a seller is if you're hung on a number and you want to go put it on the market and you want to price your house such that when you back out fees and whatnot, you're going to get your number. That's not the best way of pricing a house. The house should be priced at its market value, and that's the way to do it. So trying to back into your ultimate sales price based on what you want to net is a tough way to go about it. And as you can see from the original list to the original sale, the original list is $689, the sale at $605. They didn't get their number, and in the process, they had to go on the market for 60 days and go through, the process. And so oftentimes your first option is your best, but You live and learn.
And on the listing sheet, they said on there's a 12-year-old roof. And the reason I highlighted that, just so people know, typically at an inspection, what an inspector would tell you that between 20 and 25 years would be at the end of a roof's useful life. 25, the number you would stick with?
Yeah, for a house that's this old. Nowadays, yeah, you can, these roofs that you're putting on now can be 30.
30, 40-year shingles, yeah. So that's 30 Aletha. 345 Brookline is next up. And this one, again, a lot of these houses moving in a short period of time. It just took 6 days for this one to go from $599 on the market to a sale for $610.
Yeah, it's a great spot. I mean, it's near Mitchell School, the high school. I mean, Brookline's kind of a busy road, but again, the 5s and 6s are really hot in this town, and it was a good house.
Yeah, good spot too. Maybe they just should have let the assessing department price it because they were right on, spot on. $300 off the final sales price. This was sold by an agent at a JP, but I believe you'd said also a local agent. Works out of a JP office, but lives here in town, so knows the area. So,
knows the market well.
286 Rosemary is the next listing. $640 for the sales price on that one, just 20 days on market. That's a really big house, 20,000 square feet. I'm guessing that might be a typo. I don't know. Maybe it was mistakenly put in there as the lot size.
No, that is a gigantic house. It's the largest house ever to sell.
Maybe that's why the seller was so motivated. It was just too much space.
Too much to take care of.
That's right.
Heating bills were enormous.
All right, so we're going to
think about a motivated seller.
That's probably a 2,900. Well, either way, the motivated seller. We talked about this a little bit prior to going on the air. The motivated seller, I like it as a tactic, as a strategy when you're listing a house. The only time I don't like it is when you have a motivated seller to go along with the listing that's been on the market for 100 or 200 days, because then at that point the motivated seller tactic doesn't hold a lot of water. But if you do indeed have somebody who is motivated and they, for whatever reason, want to sell their house, you should let prospective buyers know that, because it usually will lead to a speedier transaction when they get the sense that they can get some value in exchange for the motivation to sell their house.
Yeah, I mean, some sellers are a little weary of, well, I don't want to look too desperate, but like Rob said, if you can convey that a seller is motivated, it's going to attract at least some interest or hopefully some offers, and you can always work with offers. And your first offer, may not be your ultimate selling price, but something to work with. So the object is to get people in, have offers made, and work with potential buyers.
We're working our way up to the mid-6s. Next up on the list is 50 Fay Lane, listed for $649, sold for $649, just 28 days, right?
How about that? A lot of sales in Hillside and Elliott.
And a lot of sales that are moving quickly.
Yeah.
Just shuffling right through. A lot of carpet in this one. I noticed on the pictures. Do you think if you can and you have the means, if there's hardwoods underneath, do you think it's worth it to pull up those carpets, or just telling people that the hardwoods are underneath enough?
I mean, one of the first things that people do when they're buying houses like this is you're either going to completely clean these carpets or you're going to remove them. So hardwood floors are definitely a big selling point versus older carpet. So I would say if you have the means and it's not a gigantic inconvenience, you could take them up. So some people, they're living in the house when they're trying to sell it, and taking up the carpet isn't always the easiest thing to do, because then you sometimes have to follow that right up with redoing the hardwood floors, which is tough if you're living in the house. But if you have the opportunity, it's never a bad idea.
And if you're not sure if there are hardwoods underneath the carpet in the bedrooms, what do?
You just pull up a little corner.
Do that, or maybe look in the closet, because sometimes they don't carpet the closets.
That's a good
underneath.
idea. That's a good idea.
535 Great Plain Avenue.
Here I am,
this
one,
one,
up the corners.
I'm jumping ahead
Sorry.
here. A pretty big discrepancy between original list and what it's sold for. It was on the market for an extended period of time.
Yeah, I mean, this was a tough sale, and it's on Great Plain Ave. It's on a bend. It's a house that has a lot of square feet. So when you're looking at it on paper, it looks like it looks a lot more attractive than it may ultimately be. It's a lot of small rooms, some choppiness.
A lot of choppiness.
A lot of choppiness. The house was finished and updated, over various periods during its history. So I think this, I feel like the ultimate buyers probably got good value. But it was a tough listing.
Yeah, and you probably had some disappointed sellers because they thought their house might have been worth a little bit more, but the market has spoken.
Yep.
At 16 Utica, the market has spoken there as well, and the market has decided that house is worth $655.
Yep. But included in that is a diving board with a slide for the pool.
Yeah, if you could have a pool with either a slide or a diving board, which would you rather have?
I'm going slide, because you can always just dive off the side.
That's right. Yeah.
A slide, you can't slide off the side.
As a kid, I mean, if you got access to a pool with a slide, Yeah, bonus.
That's a gold mine.
This house located just off of Highland Ave, right near 128. 140 Laurel Drive. That house sold for $657. Sold for above list price.
Something about Laurel. I'm telling you, over the last couple of years, since the start of 2010, you'd have 13 sales on Laurel, which may not sound like a lot, but there's only 60 addresses on that street. So that's basically almost a quarter of that street is turned over in 3 years. I mean, to put it in perspective, if you're looking at Great Plain Ave, there's something like 300 and plus houses on Great Plain Ave, and only 25 have sold in that same period of time. So Laurel is a unique little enclave in Needham. It's a great little spot, and it hasn't been difficult to sell your house when you put it on the market. So even though there's been a lot of turnover, you know that you're gonna get interest on Laurel.
Right. The listing sheet said "Come fall in love," and I just simply looked at the pictures and I fell in love.
Yeah.
90 Falcon Street, Mitchell School District. This house, do you get a chance to see that one?
Yeah, a little bit of a quirky addition, but you know, a good spot in town. Sold for $670, listed for $700. Again, if you're going to list it for $700, why not list it for $699? It doesn't seem like a big difference, but it can never hurt.
We've talked about a few houses that are close to the highway. Now we're going to move to a few other things that you can live close to. First and foremost, let's talk about cemeteries. 236 Parish Road is right across the street from one. Does it frighten you to think about living across the street from a cemetery?
Well, I mean, it frightens me as a listing agent. I mean, just because you know you're going to have to show that house a lot more than you would if there wasn't a cemetery there. When you talk about locations, you can always change your paint colors, your floors, your carpet, your kitchen, your bathrooms. You can't change your location. You can't do anything about that cemetery being there. So you, as a buyer, you're going to expect less for your money.
Would you rather live next to a cemetery, or would you rather live next to a gas station? Which brings us to our next listing, which is on 1141 Great Plain Avenue. It's right across the street there, Nahoyden. You have this house, then you have Nahoyden, then you have the mobile gas station.
Right. I mean, personally, I think I would rather be next to a cemetery, but you know, that's up to the market, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a little more usefulness living next to a gas station than next to a cemetery.
Right, you can't get any milk at the cemetery.
Right, or at least you don't want to. But this house is a big one too.
Yeah.
2,500. It looked bigger it looked bigger than 2,500 square feet.
Well, it's small rooms, but it's an older home. It's very, very pretty, very elegant. It's a nice house, and it's in a really cool part of town, sort of being on Great Plain, right next to town. But unfortunately, as you mentioned, it is smack dab across from the mobile station.
It is a nice house. Speaking of nice houses, 470 Chestnut is also a nice house. This one built in 1995. You don't see too many houses built in the 90s.
No.
But this seemed like a great value, a good size house, nice condition, big lot.
I thought so. And a nice open first floor plan, $262 a foot. I'd say this was a pretty good buy.
Yeah, it jumped off the page for me, which probably explains why it was just on the market for 5 days.
Yep.
56 North Hill Ave, another really nice house. Sold for the 8s.
Yeah, the eights are an odd number in the Needham market. You don't really see too many sales in the 8s. I mean, since the start of 2010, only 8% of MLS listings were sold in the 8s, and that actually includes some that started out in the 9s or above and ended up settling in the 8s. And that makes it tough as a real estate agent, tough to price because you don't have a lot of comps. It's in the ones that sell in the 8s, there's a lot of differences. Some are the big older homes on big lots out in like Country Way, out in that part of town, and then some are like this one on North Hill Avenue that have nothing alike about them, and it's tough to comp those out when you're an agent, either for your client, the seller, or if you're working for the buyer and they're trying to value the house.
Right. Well, one comp they didn't have access to at the time was 43 Coolidge, which is our next house.
Yep.
And Coolidge is an area that we talked about pretty extensively last month. And on paper, this seems like a great deal.
Agreed.
Because the two houses that we looked at last month both sold for in the high 300s per square foot. This one just $283 per square foot, and it looked like it was really nice on the inside.
Yeah, very, very nicely updated. This to me, this seems like a great buy. I mean, as we mentioned last month, the ladder streets, the Coolidge, it's a very, very desirable place to live, and it looks like somebody really killed it there.
24 Paul Revere is a house that was, for all intents and purposes, new construction. $879, bang, sold for that number. When I first saw it, I thought $899 would be a good number. Maybe $879 was the right number. It certainly isn't worth any less than that.
Right.
But a nice job on this house and a lot of space and basically a new house.
Yep.
It wasn't completely torn down and built up, but it was about as close to a gut renovation as you can get.
Yep.
31 Glendale, something about that house that I noticed immediately was that it sold for $930 and it was just 3 beds. And do you know, over the past year, how many 3 beds have sold for more than $930,000?
No.
0.
Ha!
So this was the most expensive 3-bed to sell in Needham over the past 12 months.
Bravo seller.
Bravo seller.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the house had a lot of other things going for it to sell for that number. Over the past 3 years, just one that has sold for over $930,000. 17 Ardmore. This was a house that was, what do you like? It's not new. You like to call it houses that are
young.
It's young.
Yeah.
It was a young house built in 2000. Thoughts on that one?
Just stretching its legs.
Yeah.
I mean, Ardmore is another one of those little enclaves, kind of like Laurel, where you just see a lot of. There's been a lot of development. There's a lot of new construction. They started turning over probably around when this one was beginning, but it's a good little pocket. People really like that neighborhood. And
people also like the neighborhood on Richardson. That seems to be a popular spot. People pay for the houses. They also pay for the lots. You get a lot of land out there.
A lot of land. And this 111 Richardson abuts the town forest, also on a cul-de-sac, which I personally find very appealing.
That's a great street, and you get a lot of space out there. 41 Sargent Street is up next. It sold for $1.16 million, which was pretty close to its list. Not often you see such a small days on market period for houses that start to get above and beyond the 1.1 million, but you like the location of this one.
Yeah, I really do. I think it's a great location. It's a big lot for that part of town also. This is over by Mitchell School. This is another young house. And the thing that jumped out at me about this one is it came on the market when there was some pretty deep competition in this price point and in this sort of ilk, and this house sold in 12 days. And so it had a lot to like. And if you're the seller of some of the other houses that saw this come on and go off while you were still holding yours, that must have been discouraging.
Yep, just a hop, skip, and a jump to Perry Park. We now move on to the new construction segment of the show. 11 Brentwood sold for 1.2. That was a brand new house with some nice appliances.
Yeah, and it was also staged. And it's one thing as a developer, you think about, does the staging of the house contribute to a higher sales price? And then the follow-up question, is it worth the cost of the staging? Because it's not cheap, but it definitely paid off here.
28 Birds Hill Ave. You know what I noticed about that listing?
It was green?
It wasn't completed in that picture, but it was the only house in the past year to sell for over $1 million, and it sold for over 1.2, that was on a lot smaller than 7,500 square feet. So that's a lot to pay for a small lot.
Yeah.
Obviously a good location, brand new house.
Right.
But that one I noticed immediately. 31 Grassmere. We're going back to the kind of the Ardmore neighborhood.
Yeah.
This would have been the big seller in another month.
Yeah, congratulations, Grassmere.
But this was a good number for the builder, don't you think?
I would think so, yeah.
All right. So there you have it. We've looked at every house per MLS that is sold in July.
I'm bushed.
And I am tired, but hold on. I need a little more energy out of you so we can take a look at the market snapshot so people can get a little bit of a flavor on what we have coming up for next month. Here's what the market looks like as of today. Few things going on, quite a few active single-family listings, but less than last month, which is probably a good thing, don't you think?
Yeah, it is. It speaks to the absorption. I mean, there's still some listings out there that have been dangling, but as we get through the month of August and into September after Labor Day, we should see a pickup.
Yep, 58 single-family homes under agreement, which says that maybe the numbers are going to start to dip a little bit more next month with things that sold. The average listing price, not surprised that that's gone up considerably based on the fact that you had so many lesser-priced homes selling this past month. Days on market, 139, and the average list price per square foot is up there, 338. We want that to get down, what, you think about $30 per square foot?
That's where we see it month to month.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens next month, and as long as those numbers go down, we'll have more sales to talk about. In the meantime, hopefully you like the new way we've kind of laid out the show for you. Ryan, you got a phone number for people to call if they want to either switch the format or have any questions or want to know the value of their home. What number should they call?
They should call 781-707-6564.
One more time.
781-707-6564.
Well done.
All right.
That does it for this installment of What's My House Worth? My name is Rob. This is Ryan. We will see you soon.
Have a good one.